That morning, no one felt that anything would be different. No one felt a thing. At a small, quiet harbour, two men, father and son, boarded their boat for one last fishing trip. The day, with its cobalt blue sky, seemed to see them off, while the sea lay eerily smooth. As they had done for years, they loaded their nets, their iceboxes and their dreams. Neither Lisa Peton, watching them through the kitchen window, nor the town's dogs scurrying along the shore, knew that this was not just another fishing trip. They would not come back, and what followed would become a story written by the deep secrets of the ocean, the dark whispers of the town, and the resilience of the human spirit. That evening, when their boat did not return to the harbour, people said, "Maybe they're just running late." By the next morning, when they were still missing, faces began to tighten. After 3 days, Coast Guard planes circled above the blue waters, and the townsfolk fixed their eyes on the horizon. No flare, no slick of oil, not even a splinter of wood. The sea had swallowed them whole. But that wasn't the truth. The truth was far stranger and far more cruel. Their disappearance in those waves was only the beginning, and Lisa Peton would spend her life chasing an answer. A woman waging her own war, against the ocean, against government procedures, against the hollow, hopeless stares of those around her. They were lost, but they were not forgotten, because the real story wouldn't be written on the day they vanished, but on the day they were found again. An island, a piece of land that didn't appear on any map. A journal, its pages damp and heavy with salt, holding the final words, a mother waiting for 12 endless years, and at last, a truth that emerged. Everything was deeper than it seemed. This is the story of stubbornness, of love, of the instinct to survive, and of the ocean's endless mysteries. The story of Crescent Harbor's unforgettable lost ones, an echo that would linger for years to come. As the first light of dawn lazily rose on the horizon of Crescent Harbor, the town was only just waking up. The sea swallowed the light beneath a thin veil of mist, and the scent of salt drifted into the windows of the houses along the shore. The ropes of boats lined up along the dock creaked softly in the wind. Everything at the harbour seemed ordinary, everything just as it should be. But the unease inside Lisa Peton was quietly growing. She stood at the kitchen window, pressing the steam of her coffee cup to her face as she watched them. Tom's back was to her. With his large, solid hands, he carefully stacked the fish crates, while Jake moved with younger, more hurried motions, gathering the fishing rods. Father and son were getting ready to set out early this morning, just as they had for years. But in Lisa's gaze, there was a heaviness today that wasn't there before. Without lifting his head, Tom called out, "Jake, did you tie the ropes tight?" "Yeah, Dad, but are you sure the new reel is at the bottom? You messed it up yesterday." Tom chuckled and glanced over his shoulder at his son. "I haven't messed up that reel in 20 years, son. You save that brain of yours for your books." Jake shot a fleeting look at his mother. Lisa caught it. A mixture of boyish excitement and a flicker of worry. An impulse rose in her to open the window and say, "Don't go today." But she didn't. Because she trusted Tom. She had to. She set her cup down on the table and slowly opened the kitchen door. Her steps crunched on the gravel as she walked toward their boat. When Tom turned, that familiar smile was already on his face. "You're up early," he said. Lisa frowned slightly. "Should I bring you some coffee?" "Thanks, but no need. The weather's calm. We'll be back in 2 hours." But they both knew that wasn't true. Fishermen never came back in 2 hours, especially not Tom. He never returned without catching the best. Jake was already rubbing his hands, eager to get out to sea. Lisa stroked her son's cheek. "Don't catch a chill. Wear something warmer." "Mum, it's hot, look. The sea's like glass." "Doesn't it always start that way?" Lisa thought to herself. The sea always looked like a friend, but it never showed what it hid below. When Tom finished loading, the other fishermen of the town had begun making their way down as well. Familiar faces, cheerful good mornings, the smell of ropes and oily engine smoke, all mingled together. But Lisa could hear only her own heartbeat. For some reason, it was pounding harder than usual this morning. Maybe I'm just being silly, she thought. Tom approached her, resting a hand on her shoulder and giving it a gentle squeeze. Don't worry, we'll bring back plenty of fish today. Lisa nodded, but the knot inside her didn't loosen. She caught a faint weariness in Tom's eyes, a kind of quiet that had settled in him lately. He'd been more withdrawn these past few days, but she hadn't found the courage to ask. Maybe something at work, she told herself. Jake's voice broke their silence. Dad, everything's ready. Tom turned and smiled at his son. For just a moment, Lisa wished she could stop time. Capture this image of father and son standing side by side, filled with hope and dreams. But time is merciless. Tom turned back to her one last time, bent and kissed her forehead. See you tonight. Take care of yourselves. Don't worry, Tom said. But in that moment, he avoided meeting her eyes. Jake flashed his mother a huge grin. Mum, I'm bringing you back a giant swordfish. Promise? Promise. And then they boarded the boat. The motor coughed a few times before rumbling to life. As the wind tossed her hair into her face, Lisa felt the strange weight inside her becoming sharper. Something's going to happen, she thought. But she didn't know what. When the boat pulled away from the dock, she was supposed to wave, but her hands stayed where they were. As they receded, the busy harbour shrank. The morning sun shone brighter, and the glitter of the waves stung her eyes. She blinked. At some point, Tom and Jake's figures melted into the mist. They were no longer visible. While the rest of the town went about its day, Lisa stood alone at the shore. Other fishermen's wives chatted. Children began playing along the beach. But she stayed where she was, feeling the cold stones beneath her bare feet. Her neighbour Martha came over. Lisa, what is it? You're frozen there. Lisa smiled, but there was no joy in it. It's nothing. Tom took off at the crack of dawn again. I see. Yes. Martha looped her arm through hers. The ocean's temperamental these days, but Tom knows what he's doing. Lisa didn't say what she was thinking. She knew how careful Tom was. But this morning felt different. The sea was different. The air was different. And most of all, Tom was different. When she returned home, their footprints still lingered outside the door. She stood staring at the marks from their boots for minutes. Then she went inside. Their presence still clung to every corner. Jake's seashells in his room, Tom's foreman's notes on the desk, the half-finished board game in the living room, all here. But they were gone. At some point, her hands trembled as she glanced at the clock. It was only 10 o'clock. Normally, they'd already be far out by now. It was still early, she told herself. Nothing to panic about. They'd just gone fishing. But the unease inside her grew with each passing hour. That afternoon, she tried to keep busy in the town square. Bought some flour from the market, some meat from the butcher. Every familiar face she met said the same little things. Tom's out early again today, huh? Jake went with him. Good for them. The weather's perfect. They'll bring back a good catch. Lisa only nodded, finding it hard to form words. As she stepped into one of the little shops, the sounds around her seemed muffled. Laughter, the clinking of coins between fingers, bells chiming on doors. It all felt distant, unimportant. Hours passed. It was evening now. As the sun neared the horizon, the harbour came alive again. The fishermen returned one by one, hauling up their nets, unloading their crates, washing their catch. All of them came back, but their boat, Second Chance, was still nowhere to be seen. 6:15 p.m. Lisa's fingers trembled over the phone's buttons. Maybe the engine broke, she thought. Maybe the nets got tangled. Maybe they just stayed a few hours longer. But the insidious fear inside her could no longer be silenced. She ran her fingers along the keys and dialed the Coast Guard. A polite but calm voice answered. "Coast Guard, Crescent Harbor. How can I help you?" At first, Lisa couldn't speak. Then, almost in a whisper, "My husband and my son. They haven't come back. When did they leave?" "Early this morning. Boat name? Second Chance. Tom and Jake Peaton." In the silence that followed, she understood everything. "All right, Mrs. Peaton. Don't worry. We'll check right away." After hanging up, Lisa stood frozen. When she brought her hands to her face to wash it, she didn't recognize the woman in the mirror. In her eyes was a strange determination, but also a rising fear. She stepped outside and went back to the harbour, as if her gaze alone could summon them from the horizon. But the sea, now spread like a black shroud in the twilight, stared back at her. Silent, unmoving. That night she didn't sleep. She sat on the rocks near the harbour, wrapped in a blanket, watching the waves. Each breaking wave eroded her hope a little more. A shooting star streaked across the sky. She made a wish. "Please, bring them both back to me." But her wish was swallowed by the sound of the waves, and the darkness of the night devoured them, and her hope whole. As night fell, a deep silence settled over Crescent Harbor. The last boats at the dock had pulled in their nets. The town's children had long since gone home, and the street lamps flickered to life, casting their glow on the cobblestone paths. But Lisa Peaton was still sitting on the rocks, wrapped in a blanket. Her eyes were fixed on the horizon. In every wave she searched for a fragment of hope. In every calling gull she listened for a sign. It was already 9:00 p.m. The sun had fully set, and the sea had darkened into an inky navy blue, but still there was no trace of Tom's boat. At last, Lisa pulled the blanket tighter around herself, stood, and began walking back to the harbour. Her steps quickened as her mind churned like a whirlpool. She kept trying to remind herself how careful Tom always was, how he never rushed, how deliberate he was. But the heavy stone in her chest, it was lying to her. When she reached the dock, a few fishermen were still working on their boats. One of them looked up as she passed and nodded. "Lisa, still waiting?" "Yes," she replied, her voice barely audible. "Maybe the engine failed. They'll be back by morning." But she couldn't wait until morning. When she picked up the phone at home, it was already 9:30. She called the Coast Guard again. This time her voice was firmer. "My husband and son still haven't returned. They left this morning and they're not back yet." After a pause, the operator asked, "Since what time have they been missing?" "They should have been back by 6. Boat name? Second Chance. Tom and Jake Peaton." The tone of the voice on the line turned serious. "All right, Mrs. Peaton. I've taken your information. We're notifying our teams. Please remain at home. We'll contact you as soon as we have news." When she hung up, her hands were shaking. She gripped the table tightly. Her eyes fell on the dinner table, still set for 3. Jake's favourite blue plate, Tom's mug. She couldn't bring herself to move a thing. Around midnight, the phone rang. "Mrs. Peaton, this is Captain Brennan. Coast Guard, Crescent Harbor. We're assembling a team now. We're at the harbour. At first light, we'll begin the search, but our patrol boats will head out in the next few hours to make an initial sweep. Please, stay at home. We'll call you with any updates." "Thank you," Lisa murmured, though her voice had lost all its resonance. Her eyes were vacant. She ran a hand through her hair, wandered aimlessly around the house. She entered Jake's room. The ocean-themed posters still clung to the walls. In the corner, his backpack lay half open, university brochures spilling out. In bold letters, Marine Biology, University of Maine. She ran her hand over the bag. What if they're never coming back, she thought. But her mind was afraid to finish the question. By dawn, she had fallen asleep, curled in a chair by the window. In her dream, there were waves, huge, dark waves, and Tom's voice, calling to her. Lisa, Lisa, find us. She opened her eyes just as the sun was rising. She went straight to the kitchen, made coffee. Her hands still trembled. Outside, she heard motors, whistles, and megaphone calls. She rushed to the window. The harbour was buzzing with activity. Coast Guard boats, the sound of a helicopter, people gathering. She ran for the door. When she reached the dock, the first person she saw was Captain Brennan, a short, broad-shouldered woman. The collar of her uniform was stained with salt, but her eyes were steady. She came straight to Lisa. Mrs. Peton, good morning. We've been waiting for you. Is there any news? Not yet, but the weather is good. Our first patrol is heading out. We'll search an area about 50 square miles and then expand from there. Lisa nodded, but the tension in her face didn't ease. Tom was careful. This couldn't have happened. Brennan lowered her head slightly. The sea is not always a friend, Mrs. Peton, but we'll do everything we can. Just then, a helicopter fired up its rotors. The wind whipped Lisa's hair across her face. She squinted. People had gathered along the dock, some praying, some simply staring silently. The first reports came back after a few hours. Nothing had been found. No wreckage, no sign. It was as though the boat had melted into the sea. Lisa clasped her hands together in despair, walked over to Brennan, and managed to speak. What do you mean? Nothing. Brennan sighed lightly. We've only just begun. We'll widen the area, adjust for currents and wind direction. We'll find them. But something inside Lisa whispered otherwise. By noon, search crews began recruiting help from local fishermen. Lisa, waiting with the other women at the dock, overheard whispers passing from mouth to mouth. Tom, he knows what he's doing. Jake's a strong swimmer. Maybe they got picked up by another boat. Maybe the engine failed. But she could hear the doubt under their hopeful words. People avoided her eyes, chose their words carefully. Brennan returned, unrolling a map. Mrs. Peton, around 11 a.m. yesterday, Tom's last radio call reported seeing a big school of fish. He sounded happy. We're centering the search there. There's still hope. Lisa bit her lip and nodded. That was all. Just that. All afternoon, boats came and went. Helicopters lifted off again. People lined the shore with binoculars and bare eyes scanning the sea. And as the sun set, the first day's report came back. No trace. That night, Lisa returned home to find the rooms colder, darker. She went into Jake's room, sat on his bed, unsure what to do. She wrapped herself in a blanket and stared out the window. The moon lit the ocean silver. The silence of the sea only made the storm inside her louder. "Where are you?" she whispered. "Where are you?" But no answer came. By the second day, all the town's fishermen had volunteered. More than 20 boats joined the Coast Guard. Lisa couldn't stand to wait any longer. She stood in front of Brennan. "I'm coming with you." Brennan at first refused. "The area's huge, very dangerous. You're inexperienced." But Lisa met her eyes and said, "I have to find them, please." Brennan hesitated, then finally nodded. "All right, but promise me. You keep your harness on, and you do exactly what I say." Lisa nodded quickly. An hour later, she was out on a boat with the search team. Farther out, the sea grew rougher. The waves were no longer gentle like they were by the shore. Each strike shook the boats. Spray stung their faces. But Lisa never took her eyes off the horizon. Through her binoculars, she inspected every shadow, searched every crest for a glimmer. Brennan barked directions into the radio while Lisa felt herself swallowed by the wind and the water. Hours passed. Then one of the volunteers peering into the sea suddenly shouted, "There's something there!" Her heart nearly stopped. Everyone rushed to that side. but it was only an old fish crate floating on the water. The disappointment settled like a cold stone in their stomachs. Again and again and again. Nothing. By evening, when they returned to the harbour, silence hung heavy. People stood with bowed heads, the hope drained from their faces. Brennan turned to Lisa. "Tomorrow we'll double the search area. The ocean still keeps many secrets." Lisa closed her eyes. In her mind, Tom's and Jake's laughter flashed before her. "Hold on," she told herself. "They're out there somewhere. I'll find you." That night, back home, she sat on Jake's bed, took out his journal and wrote on the first page, "I've begun today. However long it takes, I will find you." She cracked open the window. The sea breeze tousled her hair. She looked up at the sky and whispered, "No matter what, I won't give up." On the third morning, Crescent Harbor woke under a sky even greyer and heavier than the two before. The clouds hung like a leaden blanket over the shore, and a damp fog rolled along the waterfront. Lisa had risen early again. Her face was paler now, shadowed by sleeplessness, dark circles etched beneath her eyes. Nights had become impossible. She tossed and turned, opened the window to stare at the sea, waiting for Tom's voice to somehow rise out of the waves. When she reached the harbour that morning, she noticed a different kind of activity. Not just Coast Guard boats this time, but a few official vehicles on shore and men with unfamiliar faces. On the back of one jacket, gold letters spelled out, "Maine State Police." As Lisa walked, a fisherman leaned toward her and whispered, "Detective Kowalski's here. That means it's serious now." Lisa froze for a moment. She repeated the name softly. "Kowalski?" The fisherman nodded. "They send the best, but he doesn't let go easy." Detective Ray Kowalski met Lisa for the first time in the small administration office at the harbour entrance. His black overcoat was dusted with salt, his neatly cropped hair streaked with grey. His face held neither warmth nor cold, only a practiced indifference carved by countless similar cases. He extended a hand. "Mrs. Peaton, my condolences. I'm Detective Kowalski. I'll be taking over the case." Lisa's lips were chapped as she shook his hand. "Thank you, but there's still hope, isn't there?" For a flicker of a moment, Kowalski's eyes softened, but he tilted his head slightly, answering in an even tone. "There is always hope, but I have to work with probabilities. I'll be honest with you. My job is to find out what happened, not what might have happened." Lisa's throat tightened, but she nodded, quietly. "Whatever you need, I'll help." Kowalski gestured to a chair and pulled out a small notepad, beginning his questions. "Did your husband have any debts, enemies, anything he was hiding?" "No, never." "Any arguments your son was involved in? Other plans he didn't tell you about?" "Jake, he's just a boy. He loved the sea. He was preparing for college." "Did your husband have life insurance?" "Yes, but we had no debts. He couldn't have planned anything." At one point, Kowalski looked up. "Are you sure, Mrs. Peaton? Sometimes people don't tell their loved ones everything." Lisa's hands curled into fists. "I'm sure. Tom wasn't like that." For a moment, he stayed quiet, then said gently, "Sometimes even the closest don't know, but we'll find out. I'm here." All day, Kowalski's presence hovered over the town. He spoke with everyone at the harbour. The young apprentice at the boatyard said, "They looked happy that morning." The girl at the tackle shop said, "He bought my best bait," smiling. He reviewed the marina records, requested Tom's bank statements, took copies of his insurance policy. A fisherman murmured to Kowalski, Tom was an honest man, did everything to keep this town afloat. But the sea doesn't forgive. Kowalski closed his notepad. The sea doesn't forgive, but neither do people when they make mistakes. Lisa watched him from a distance throughout the day. She noticed how intently he looked into people's eyes, how quietly he took notes. Later in the day, Brennan came over. Lisa, you should rest. Kowalski knows what he's doing. Lisa shook her head, but didn't move from her spot. What can he find? There's nothing. Brennan placed a hand on her shoulder. Maybe, something small, but sometimes small things change everything. Toward evening, Kowalski approached her. His hands were in his coat pockets, his eyes steady again. A few more questions, Mrs. Peaton. Did your husband act differently when he left that morning? Any phone calls? Anyone unusual? Lisa furrowed her brow. No, he was completely normal. Looked for his glasses, drank his coffee, kissed Jake, even joked. I'm leaving the big fish for you this time. Nothing else. Kowalski nodded, then added in a low voice. Someone at the marina said Tom spent some time on his phone that morning. I'll need to check the records. But was there anyone who ever troubled you? Lisa froze. She searched her mind for names but found nothing. No, never. Kowalski jotted it down. Tomorrow morning, I'll stop by your house. I'll need to look at Tom's office, the garage, his room, unless there's something you'd like to tell me now. Lisa lowered her head involuntarily. All right. That night, back at home, Kowalski's words echoed in her mind. Sometimes even the closest don't know. Small things change everything. She sat at the dinner table, fingers laced. Jake's school uniform still hung on the back of a chair. Her eyes drifted toward Tom's workshop. What could she possibly find there? She'd seen everything there already, or so she thought. In the morning, Kowalski arrived carrying a small bag, measuring tape, flashlight, camera, and entered the house with professional calm. Let's start in the garage. Lisa rubbed her hands as they moved between the vehicles. Kowalski methodically opened drawers, inspected tools. At one point, he opened a drawer and found a small box. Inside were some old letters, a compass, a few photographs, and a key. What's this? He asked. Lisa glanced at it. Just old things. The compass was from his father. I don't know about the key. Kowalski studied the key, then slipped it into his pocket. Could belong to a locker at the marina. I'll check. After finishing in the workshop, he moved to Tom's room. He searched drawers, closets, between books. At the bedside clock, he paused and carefully opened it. Inside was a small envelope. On the front, only a single letter. L. Kowalski showed it to her. Is this you? Lisa took it in trembling hands and opened it. Inside was a note, only a few words. If anything happens, I've always loved you. Please forgive me. Her hands went numb. Tears welled up. What does this mean? Kowalski studied the note for a long moment. Maybe just precaution. Maybe he knew something. I'll have to investigate. Lisa shook her head. No, Tom told me everything. Everything, Kowalski said gently, after a pause. Sometimes people don't want to hurt those they love, Mrs. Peaton. We have to consider all possibilities. Lisa closed her eyes. In that instant, she felt the weight of small secrets she never knew existed. That day, when Kowalski returned to the shore, Lisa remained in her chair, the envelope still in her hands. She read the note again. I've always loved you. Please forgive me. She thought of Tom all night, the day they met, the smile on his face when Jake was born. And that last morning, he seemed happy. But had he been carrying something inside? Staring at the sea through the window, tears streamed down her face. What were you hiding, Tom? What were you hiding? The next morning, Kowalski called. Mrs. Peaton, we found a locker at the marina. The key fit. Inside were some documents and a recorder. I need to go over it with you. Lisa's chest tightened. What documents? I haven't looked yet. But I'll come by tonight and we'll review it together. When she hung up, her knees buckled. The ocean was still silent, still dark. But now, beneath the waves, it wasn't just Tom and Jake lying hidden. There were buried secrets, whispering doubts, and a fractured trust. And Lisa whispered softly to herself, "Whatever I find, I'll forgive you, but I need to know." As evening darkness once again quietly swallowed Crescent Harbor, Lisa stood at her living room window, staring out. A thin veil of mist hovered over the sea, and the lights from the dock danced fractured across the water. Her hands lay in her lap, clutching the phone tightly since dusk. She couldn't shake the words Kowalski had said that morning. The key fit. Inside were documents and a recorder. "I need to go over them with you." At 8:30, the sound of an engine outside broke her trance. Kowalski's car stopped in front of the house. He appeared at the door with a black case and a small plastic box in his hands. His eyes were as cold as ever, but this time there was a faint weight behind them. Lisa opened the door, and the detective inclined his head slightly. "Good evening, Mrs. Peaton. I know this is hard, but I didn't want to leave it until tomorrow. No, you did the right thing. Come in, please." They sat in the living room. Lisa's eyes immediately went to the box he placed on the table. The rusty outline of an old lock was still visible on it. The key lay on the table, along with a small recorder and several thick envelopes. Kowalski took out the documents from the box and laid them out. Each was old, edges curled, stamped with dates. At the very top, in Tom's handwriting, was a heading, "Second Chance, Notes and Records." Lisa's throat closed. She put her hand over the papers. "What does this mean?" Kowalski shook his head silently. "I don't know yet, but the recorder has a few messages, and the documents are in Tom's handwriting. Let's listen to it together." The recorder was an old grey tape player. Kowalski slipped the batteries in and pressed play. Tom's voice filled the room, hoarse, tired, but unmistakably his. "If this recording is found, Lisa, I have to tell you the truth. Maybe you'll never forgive me, but I had no choice. What I did, it was to protect you, Jake, and you." Lisa's hands began to shake. Tears welled in her eyes, but she couldn't look away. Tom's voice continued. "That day, there was a man waiting for me at the marina. An old debt from years ago. I owed them money, Lisa. Gambling debt. Things you didn't know. I hid it for so long, but that morning they found me. They left me no choice. Either you pay or you'll regret it for your son. They said, what could I do? The only way to protect Jake was to head out to sea, to run from them. Maybe I'd find a way. Maybe I could disappear." Lisa buried her face in her hands. Her heart pounded in her chest. She remembered that morning's breakfast, Tom's hands faintly trembling, but the broad smile on his face. Now everything looked different in this light. The recording continued. "If you find this, and you will, please don't blame Jake. He was innocent. It was all my fault. Please forgive me. I've always loved you, Lisa, and I still do." The tape clicked to a stop. The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. Kowalski fixed his gaze on Lisa. Seems he had debts, and maybe what happened to him is tied to that. Lisa's lips parted, but no words came. She just shook her head. No. Tom would never. Kowalski, calm but firm. Maybe he wouldn't, or maybe he had no choice. That night, Kowalski examined the documents. Inside were Tom's detailed notes, names of those he owed, payments and figures, none of it familiar to Lisa. There were threatening notes signed with the initials GM, a few checks, and a receipt showing a debt of $50,000. Kowalski murmured to himself, "Who's GM?" Lisa stared blankly at the papers, as if everything in her life had suddenly lost its meaning. I don't know anything." Kowalski carefully tucked the documents into his file. I'll find out. But there's one more thing. He pulled another small envelope from the box. Inside was a single photograph. It showed Tom at the marina, speaking to two unknown men. One of them was pulling an envelope from his jacket pocket. In the background, the sign read Marina 12. Kowalski showed Lisa the photo. Do you recognize them? Lisa stared at it for a long time, swallowed. No, never seen them. Kowalski nodded, jotting down notes. Tomorrow morning I'll ask around at the marina. Someone might know them. Lisa looked at Tom in the photo one more time. There was something in his eyes. Fear. Desperation. She couldn't tell anymore. When Kowalski left at midnight, he paused at the door. Mrs. Peaton, I know this isn't easy, but know this. Whatever he did, your son is innocent. Whatever Tom did, he did it for you. Lisa nodded but couldn't hide the tears that slipped down her cheeks. When she shut the door, she leaned back against it and slid to the floor. She opened the envelope again, pressed play on the recorder to hear Tom's voice one more time. It was all my fault. I did it to protect you. Forgive me. Lisa covered her face with her hands and whispered, Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't we fight it together? The next morning, Kowalski returned to examine the marina records. He showed the previous day's photo to employees, fishermen, shopkeepers. Most shook their heads, but one man paused, an old captain who crushed his cigarette on the dock and muttered, I know the guy on the left, George McKenna. Everyone around here calls him GM. Used to lend money, but not like a bank. Bad people. Kowalski's eyes sharpened. And the other? The captain shook his head. Don't know him, but I've seen him with GM few times. Reach a nasty man. If Tom got mixed up with him, I'm not surprised. The detective noted it down. Where can I find McKenna? The captain shrugged. Boston. Moved a few years back, but he still comes and goes. He's the dark side of the sea, that one. That afternoon, Kowalski returned to find Lisa sitting at the table, lost in her notes, eyes red. He opened the file quietly. I found out who GM is. George McKenna. Shady loan shark. Boston-based. Tom owed him. Maybe that's why he ran. Lisa dropped her pen. Her lips trembled. Then maybe they're still alive. Maybe they got away. Kowalski nodded but remained cautious. Maybe. But what if he couldn't? What if he couldn't pay? His words hung in the air. Lisa lowered her gaze. In her heart there was a small flicker of hope, but also a looming fear. As Kowalski moved to the door, he turned back. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to Boston. I'll talk to McKenna. Whatever I find, I'll tell you. But you, please, stay strong. As she closed the door behind him, Lisa whispered to herself, Tom, if you're still out there, please come back. That night, the sound of the wind outside mingled with Tom's voice from the recorder. I've always loved you. Forgive me. As Lisa stared at the dark ocean from her window, she realized she was no longer just searching for her husband and son. She was also searching for the truth, buried under debts, threats, and fear. And she made herself a promise. Whatever I find, I'll find you, Tom. You and Jake. As the first light of dawn draped Crescent Harbor in a grey veil, Kowalski slung his small bag over his shoulder, flipped up the collar of his coat, locked his door, and climbed into his car. He'd left early for the trip to Boston. He hadn't really slept anyway. On the passenger seat sat Tom's photograph, the debt receipts, and a notepad with the name George McKenna scribbled across the top. As the engine rumbled to life, he took a long breath. I'm going to finish this, he muttered to himself. Lisa, meanwhile, was still awake. She'd spent another sleepless night sitting in the living room, poring over old family albums. As she ran her fingers across a photo of Tom in his youth, she thought, You'll find him, won't you, Kowalski? Whatever you find, Bring him back to me. It was around 10 a.m. by the time Kowalski reached Boston. As he drove into the city, he felt the energy of an entirely different world between the towering buildings. Under the low grey clouds, the city was alive, but cold. Unlike the close-knit warmth of Crescent Harbor, here no one looked at anyone else. He parked outside a modest hotel near South Boston, one recommended by a fellow detective. As soon as he checked in, he headed to his room, dropped his bag on the bed, and pulled out the scrap of paper from his pocket once more. George McKenna, 174 Doyle Street, Southie. Underneath was a scribbled warning. Be careful, no one leaves him unpaid. McKenna's building was a warm brick complex at the end of Doyle Street. The stairs were cracked, the walls covered in graffiti, and the door bore a rusty nameplate. Kowalski rang the bell. The door opened a crack, and a large, grey-haired man appeared. His eyes were suspicious, his voice a gravelly rasp. What do you want? I need to speak with George McKenna. Who's asking? Kowalski flipped open his badge. Kowalski, Maine State Police. Just a few questions. McKenna opened the door a little wider and stepped outside, eyeing him up and down. Maine, huh? You know this is Boston, not the ocean. Unfazed, Kowalski replied. Do you remember Tom Peaton? About 12 years ago. Borrowed money from you in Crescent Harbor. Something flickered in McKenna's face before he quickly masked it. I've done business with a lot of guys. I don't remember names. We know you went by GM. He had records of threats, debt receipts, a photograph of you at the marina that day. McKenna fell quiet, studying him, then jerked his chin toward the interior. Come in. Inside was unexpectedly neat. In the corner stood an old leather armchair, black and white boxing posters on the walls, a glass table with a cigar box and a bottle of whiskey. McKenna sat down and gestured for Kowalski to sit opposite. All right then, McKenna said. What do you want to know? Kowalski placed the photo on the table. What did you talk about with Tom Peaton 12 years ago? McKenna furrowed his brow, exhaled, and ran a hand over his hair. Tom was a good guy. He borrowed money. He gambled, but he was smart, did whatever he could to pay me back. But there came a day when he couldn't anymore. Did you threaten him? McKenna smirked without warmth. Not a threat, a reminder. I have rules. Pay up or pay in some other way. That day, I saw his boy. Nice kid. I looked Tom in the eye and said, either you bring me my money, or I'll have to look after your boy myself. Kowalski clenched his fist. So you threatened him? McKenna shrugged. Call it what you want. That morning he came to me and said, I'll find a way. Then he vanished. No money, no man. I kept quiet. You didn't go after him, even though you lost your money? McKenna took a slow sip of whiskey. You don't chase a man who sails off into the ocean. The sea's stronger than us. Kowalski wanted to press further, but McKenna's icy gaze made him hold back. Still, he'd learned something vital. Tom really had borrowed from McKenna, and ran because of it. Just as he was about to leave, McKenna suddenly pulled a small business card from his pocket. Here's a tip. Down by the old shipyard in Boston Harbor, there's a guy, used to work for me. He's one of the last people to see Tom. Name's Frankie Doyle. Kowalski took the card. Frankie Doyle. McKenna squinted. But be careful. His tongue loosens for money. He doesn't talk for free. Kowalski left and drove toward the shipyard. By the time he arrived, the sky had darkened further, and a light drizzle had begun. He walked between the warehouse buildings at the far end of the harbour. At the address McKenna had given, he entered through a rusty door. Inside smelled of smoke and oil. In the corner sat a wiry man in a long leather coat, playing with a deck of cards. Kowalski approached. Frankie Doyle? The man looked up with a sly grin. You're gonna owe me a drink, cop. Kowalski dropped a few bills on the table. Talk. Frankie pocketed the cash and stubbed out his cigarette. Tom, yeah. I saw him that morning. Thought he was bringing McKenna's money. But at the dock, he met another guy, not someone I knew, a stranger, gave Tom an envelope. Then they both headed out to sea. That's all. Describe the stranger. Frankie thought for a moment. Dark hair, grey suit, tall, kept his hands in his pockets. Never said a word, but his eyes, cold as ice. Kowalski jotted it down. Name? Don't know, but around the marina they called him Mr. Stone, always alone, like he was working for someone, but nobody knew who. Kowalski stood, pointing a finger at Frankie. If you remember anything else, you'll tell me. Frankie grinned. Bring me more money and maybe I'll remember everything. On the way back to the hotel, Kowalski's mind churned. McKenna's debt, Frankie's Mr. Stone, the envelope Tom received. The pieces were starting to fit together, but the picture was still incomplete. As he parked in front of the hotel, his phone rang. It was Lisa. Any news? She asked, her voice tired but full of hope. I spoke to McKenna. He confirmed the debt. Frankie Doyle says Tom met another man that morning. They called him Mr. Stone. Tall, in a grey suit. Gave Tom an envelope, then they sailed off together. Lisa was silent for a moment. An envelope. I wonder what was inside. I don't know yet, but I'll find out. Lisa murmured quietly. Thank you. Please, be careful. That night, Kowalski sat at the desk in his hotel room. His notepad was filling with connections. Tom owed McKenna. McKenna threatened him, used Jake as leverage. Tom met Mr. Stone at the dock. Envelope, unknown contents. Then vanished at sea. He exhaled deeply and closed his eyes. Tom's words from the tape echoed in his mind. Everything I did to protect you. Kowalski opened his eyes, staring at the photo on the desk. I'll find you, Tom, and I'll uncover it all. Kowalski woke early. In the dim light seeping through the hotel window, he caught his reflection in the mirror and noticed the dark circles under his eyes. By the time his head had hit the pillow the night before, dawn was already breaking. Frankie Doyle's lead, Mr. Stone, had kept circling his thoughts, and each time he drifted off, Tom's face pulled him back awake. Splashing his face with cold water at the sink, he made himself a promise. Today I'll find you, Mr. Stone. Whatever you're hiding, I'll uncover it. With coffee in hand, he headed toward Boston Harbor. According to Doyle, Mr. Stone was often seen around the marina, yet no one really knew what he did or who he worked for. Kowalski prepared himself to confront someone who managed to be both visible and invisible. Even early in the morning, the marina was alive. Fishermen hauled their nets. Small boats thudded against the docks and motors coughed awake. At the end of the pier, he approached a worker and asked bluntly, "Do you know Mr. Stone?" The man gave him a startled look, dropped the rope in his hands, and shook his head slowly. "Everybody knows him, but nobody knows him. Strange guy. Disappears for days, then comes back and just sits there, watching the gulls. Where can I find him?" The worker gestured toward a small shack at the far end of the pier. "Most times he's there, quiet, but be careful. People who deal with him usually regret it." Kowalski thanked him and walked on. The shack was built of old planks, its paint peeling, a few chairs scattered out front. Peeking through the window, he saw no one inside, but there, at the edge of the little dock next to it, stood a tall man in a grey suit, his back turned, watching the water. When a gull took off, the man raised his head. In that moment, Kowalski noticed something in his gaze. Cold, measured, seeing everything but revealing nothing. Taking a deep breath, he approached. "Mr. Stone?" The man turned slowly. His black hair was slicked back, his face lined, his eyes icy calm. "Who are you?" Kowalski flashed his badge. "Kowalski, Maine State Police. I need to talk to you." Mr. Stone smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. There's no police here. Boston has its own rules. Not here. I'm here about Tom Peaton. For a second, the man's expression shifted, just slightly, but he said nothing. He turned his gaze back to the gulls. You've said the wrong name, Detective. Kowalski stepped closer. I know you handed Tom an envelope 12 years ago. Then he sailed off and never returned. Tell me what you gave him and why. Mr. Stone lowered his head and sighed deeply. Tom was a good man, but good men sometimes make bad choices. I only made him an offer. What kind of offer? Freedom. Kowalski frowned. What does that mean? Mr. Stone pulled out a cigarette, lit it, and spoke through the smoke. To pay McKenna's debt, he needed to take a job. He came to me, desperate, so desperate. He brought his son along like collateral. He couldn't even look the boy in the eye anymore. He needed the money. Kowalski's hands tightened into fists. What job? Mr. Stone locked his gaze on Kowalski's. You don't want to know, Detective. Kowalski raised his voice. I do want to know. Tell me. The man smirked. That envelope contained a name, an address, and an account number. All he had to do was go, do the job, and collect his payment. But Tom, he wasn't built for it. His conscience got in the way. What happened after, I don't know. He never finished the job. Then why did he sail out? Because he couldn't escape me. And he couldn't escape the debt either. Maybe disappearing into the ocean seemed easier than what I offered. Kowalski fell silent, stepping back a little. Mr. Stone's gaze drifted back to the gulls. Did he meet anyone else that day? Was there someone with him? No, he came alone, with his son. Told me, no matter what, don't touch my boy. Then he left, never came back. Someone else took the job instead. Who? Mr. Stone paused, then pulled a small slip of paper from his pocket. Here's a lead, maybe your last one. Kowalski opened it. A single name and address. Eleanor Price, North End, room 7. When he looked up, Mr. Stone was gone. Already vanished into the crowd as if he'd never been there. On the way to the North End, Kowalski's thoughts tangled. Tom's debt, the job, his son held like collateral, this Eleanor Price. The pieces fit together, yet the knot only tightened. The boarding house was tucked behind an old Italian restaurant on a narrow street. Inside, the air was thick with incense. The elderly woman at the desk looked at him without a smile. Room 7, upstairs, last door on the right. He climbed the stairs slowly, took a deep breath and knocked. Who is it? Called a high, sharp woman's voice. I'd like to speak to Eleanor Price. The door opened. A woman in her 50s, her red lipstick slightly smeared, her hair messy, but her eyes alive, stood there. Who are you? Kowalski. Police. I need to talk about Tom Peaton. She laughed, a bitter, knowing laugh. Still chasing Tom? You came all the way here for that? What do you mean? Do you know him? She turned and waved him in. The room was dim. A battered suitcase sat on the table. A cracked mirror hung crookedly. Wine bottles lay on the floor. Poor man, she said, lighting a cigarette. He spent his life trying to protect his boy, but he got tangled with the wrong people. After he turned down Stone's offer, he came to me, said, Eleanor, I need to protect my son. Help me. But it was too late. Kowalski leaned forward. What do you mean, too late? Because someone else had already taken the job. Tom's debt was bigger than Stone's offer. That's why he sailed away. Took his son with him. To run. Where? Her eyes narrowed as she stared into the distance. Into the ocean, looking for freedom. But there is no freedom in the ocean, only a deeper kind of captivity. Kowalski's eyes fell on a battered suitcase bearing the initials TP. He pointed at it. What's that? Eleanor picked it up and opened it. Inside were a few old photos, a compass, and a strange notebook with odd symbols on the cover. She handed him the notebook. On the first page, in Tom's handwriting, were the words, "If someone finds this, Everything lies in the heart of the ocean. Kowalski closed the notebook. Eleanor took a deep drag of her cigarette. Now that you have that, there's no turning back. Whatever you're looking for, it'll take you there. But are you sure? Kowalski locked eyes with her. I'll go all the way. She gave a sad smile. Then good luck, detective. The ocean's heart is always open, but its price is steep. As Kowalski left the boarding house, clutching the notebook, he felt Mr. Stone's shadow still at his back and Eleanor's words ringing in his ears. There is no freedom in the ocean, only a deeper kind of captivity. He climbed into his car. As the sun began to set and Boston's dark streets stretched before him, he made himself another promise. I'll find you, Tom, no matter the cost. When Kowalski stepped out of Eleanor's room and melted into the streets, the sky had already darkened into a deep navy. He could feel the weight of the notebook in his pocket pressing down on him, as if he carried not just a few pages of paper, but an entire past. Sliding into his car, the vibration of the engine tightened every muscle in his body. There was just one phrase echoing in his mind, the heart of the ocean. But to figure out what that meant, he had to decipher the notebook first. Eleanor's warning still rang in his ears. What you're looking for will lead you there, but are you sure? Tonight, he would find the answer. By the time he left Boston for Maine, it was already past midnight. As he drove, he opened the notebook again and again, letting the pages whisper to him as the headlights cut through the darkness. Tom's meticulous handwriting gave him a chill each time he read. On the first page it said, "If someone finds this, everything lies in the heart of the ocean. 12 days, only 12 days." Then followed what appeared to be a kind of nautical log, line by line, day by day. Day 1, wind from the west. We set sail for the marked point on the map. Jake is scared, but I must look brave for him. Day 3, fuel running low. Not sure if we're on the right course. Check the map again. As Eleanor said, we must reach the red star. Day 5, radio silent. Engine failed, but the star is still there. The further Kowalski read, the shakier Tom's handwriting became, the words more scattered. Finally, a drawing appeared. A small island circled in the middle of the Atlantic, marked with a red star, and beneath it written, "The heart of the ocean, 42 Judi Feinsin 64 DJU 52W." Kowalski jotted the coordinates down. They pointed squarely to the middle of nowhere. He closed his eyes for a moment, realizing no search team had ever thought to look there. It was so remote and uncharted that no one had bothered. At dawn, he arrived back at Crescent Harbor. He found Sam, an old fisherman and friend who had long retired but still took his little boat out now and then. "Sam, I need your help. I have to sail out, and it's a long way." Sam blinked at him in surprise. "The ocean? Where?" Kowalski handed him the notebook and pointed to the coordinates. Sam squinted at the numbers, then whistled. "That's far, way beyond where anyone goes. Rocks, sudden storms, deadly currents. Everyone stays away. What's out there?" "I have to find out." Sam nodded slowly. "All right, but one condition. Whatever you find, don't drag me into it. I only take you there." It took 2 days to prepare. They packed food, water, fuel, flares, a satellite phone. When Kowalski boarded Sam's boat, he felt a strange mix of excitement and dread. He was one step closer to the truth. The boat slipped away from the dock. Crescent Harbor shrank behind them, and the sea grew infinite. Sam gripped the wheel and muttered, "Hold tight, detective. The heart of the ocean is no easy place to reach." The first day passed without trouble. The sun sparkled on the waves, gulls soared above, and in the distance the backs of whales breached the water. Kowalski kept rereading Tom's notes, questions piling up. Why had he gone there? What was in the heart of the ocean? To pay his debt or to escape? On the second day, the weather suddenly turned. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, and the waves rose higher. Sam throttled back and held the wheel tighter. "This is it!" he shouted over the wind. "When you get close to the heart, it always happens like this." Kowalski furrowed his brow. "Why?" "Nobody knows. Currents shift, winds turn. It feels like the sea wants to pull you in. Now I understand why people don't come back." On the third day, the storm truly struck. Rain pounded them. Waves battered the boat. As the engine groaned, Kowalski clung to the rails, scanning the darkness for stars. Then, there it was. A small shape on the horizon, a sliver of land. The island from the map. By dawn, the storm eased. Sam slowed the engine and nodded toward the shore. "Detective, this is where I stop. The rest is yours." Kowalski strapped on his life vest, grabbed his waterproof pack, lowered the dinghy into the water and rowed toward the shore. The black sand crunched under his boots as he stepped out. The island was eerie and silent. No birds, no waves. Just a strange, heavy stillness, as if it were a doorway to another world. The ground felt soft, damp, almost as if it might swallow him whole. He looked around. Driftwood scattered along the beach, a moss-covered shelter, an old stone marker, the symbol from the notebook. He approached. Symbols were carved into the stones, identical to those in Tom's notebook. He pulled it out and compared. A perfect match. He was here, the heart of the ocean. He pushed deeper into the island. Inside a crumbling shelter, he found remnants of a camp, a rotting cot, a fire pit, rusted tools. On the wall, a phrase was carved. "Everything ends here. Do not go further." Kowalski's heart pounded, but he had no choice but to go further. The deeper he went, the more stone structures he found. Winding paths, towers of rock, a well with a cracked lid. At last, half buried in the earth, he found a rusty chest. He pried it open and found a compass, some yellowed photographs, and another notebook. On the first page, written in a shaky hand, "If you found this, don't turn back. It's too late." Kowalski opened it. In Tom's familiar handwriting, "Jake and I came here because we had no other choice. But what we found here, heavier than any debt. Someone is watching. Eyes are everywhere. Jake disappeared, and I won't go back." Reading this, Kowalski felt his throat tighten. Jake had vanished, but how? Who was watching? Circling the well, he noticed a stone hatch slightly ajar. He brushed off the moss and pushed it open. A narrow staircase descended into darkness. He hesitated for a moment. A voice in his head urged him to turn back. But then the voices of Eleanor, Sam, Mr. Stone, Lisa, and most of all Tom, rose in his mind. Go all the way. Switching on his flashlight, he stepped onto the first stair. As he descended, the ocean and the island above fell silent behind him. The passage was narrow, damp, stone-lined. Tom's arrows were scratched into the walls, as if marking the way. The deeper he went, the colder and wetter it became. Finally, he entered a large chamber. At its center stood a massive stone table, covered in maps, compasses, old journals, and something covered by cloth. Kowalski pulled the cloth back. Beneath it lay an old rusted pistol and an envelope. On the envelope, a name, for Lisa. He didn't open it, because next to it, etched into the stone floor, was another message. It ends here, but the real story begins now. Kowalski picked up the letter, closed his eyes, and took a deep breath. There was no turning back now. Tom's story was over, but Jake's, and maybe his own, was just beginning. Kowalski stood before the stone table for a long moment. The letter in his hand felt almost hot, as if it were burning him, yet he couldn't bring himself to open it. The name, For Lisa, etched across it carried the weight of the woman at the center of everything, while the words carved into the stone beneath him burned into his mind. It ends here, but the real story begins now. In the dim beam of his fading flashlight, he carefully examined the other items spread across the table: maps, compasses, mouldy old journals. Some bore Tom's handwriting, but one was different. The cover bore a shaky, yet familiar script: Jake Peton. Kowalski's heart quickened. His hands trembled as he opened the journal. The first page read simply, "Dad is gone now. I'm alone." The first entries were written just after Tom's death. Jake's words were short, blunt, but painfully mature. "Dad died 3 days ago. I buried him on the hill, made a grave out of stones. I don't know what to do now." The following pages chronicled Jake's struggle to survive. Methods of fishing, his attempt to start a small garden, a rig to collect water. But each day, the loneliness and fear seeped deeper into his words. "They're watching me. I know it. Every night I hear them. In the rocks, in the trees. Someone's here." The next page was more chilling. "This island isn't ours. Someone else lives here. I don't light fires at night anymore, so they won't see me." Kowalski took a deep breath. The signs that Jake hadn't truly been alone sent a chill through him. Someone, or something, else had been on the island. He explored the stone chamber further. More symbols carved into the walls, arrows, and what looked like coded numbers. In one corner, at the edge of the floor, he found a small wooden box unopened. When he lifted the lid, he found a few more loose pages, torn from Jake's journal. "They're calling me, closer every night. Even in my dreams they speak to me. They say I have to go, but where? I made an arrow on the shore with stones. If someone finds this, it shows where I went." Kowalski bolted from the chamber. It was already past midnight, but he switched on his flashlight and ran toward the beach. Behind him, the passage and the stone room faded into darkness. The silence of the island was broken now. A faint wind howled through the rocks, and somewhere far below, a strange hum echoed. When he reached the shore, he saw it, an arrow made of stones, pointing toward the northern tip of the island. Kowalski aimed his light in that direction and took a deep breath. "Whatever I find, I'll find it. There's no turning back now." He followed the path marked by the arrow. The way grew narrower, tangled with branches and thorns, forcing him to push through. At last, he arrived at a cliff where the path seemed to end. But then he noticed something. At the edge of the cliff, half hidden by moss, was a cave entrance. A cold draft seeped from within. He stepped inside, finding more symbols carved into the walls, and further ahead, a faint beam of light stretched deeper into the cave. Slowly, he slipped inside. Every footstep echoed. His heart pounded louder with every step. At the end of the cave, he came to a small chamber, and there, in the center, knelt on the stone floor, was a skeleton. As he approached, his breath caught in his throat. Around the skeleton's neck hung an old pendant with a tiny engraved tag, JP, Jake Peton. Kowalski fell to his knees. His breath came in short gasps. Jake was here, dead, yet there was something strangely peaceful in the boy's posture, as though he'd chosen this spot himself. Beside him lay an old journal, a few pages still legible. "The voice that calls me never stops now. It hides inside the cave. I'm going there. Maybe I'll find an answer. Dad, I'm sorry. I couldn't make it home. But I'm not afraid anymore." Kowalski placed his hands on the ground beside him and murmured a quiet prayer. Then, on the cave wall, he noticed another sign glowing faintly. White paint in a complex pattern with a star at its center. Beneath it were the words, "The heart of the ocean." This was it, Tom's and Jake's final stop. But it wasn't just their story anymore. It was his journey now. When he finally emerged from the cave, dawn was breaking. The sky flickered between grey and orange, the waves lapping softly against the shore. At the cave's entrance, he arranged a circle of stones. On one, he carved Jake's name. Jake Peaton, set out to return home. Rest now. He clutched the journals and the letter tightly. At least now he could tell Lisa the truth. He had found her son's trail at the heart of the ocean. Yet still, questions echoed in his mind. What was it that Tom feared? What were the voices that called to Jake? And what exactly was the debt Mr. Stone had spoken of? For a moment, he considered going back into the cave, to search for every last answer. But something deep inside told him this was enough. Sometimes, you couldn't know everything. At least now, he had something to tell Lisa. When he returned to the shore, the sky was fully lit. In the distance, he saw Sam waiting on the boat. Sam shaded his eyes and called out, "What did you find?" Kowalski lowered his head and simply said, "Everything." There was a knowing look on Sam's face. Kowalski pulled the boat to the shore and climbed aboard. One last time, he glanced back at the island, the same silence, but now, somehow, more peaceful. Sitting there, he took out Jake's journal. On the final page was written Jake's last words. "I couldn't make it home, but find me. Don't forget me." Kowalski took a deep breath. "We won't forget you," he whispered. The boat slowly drifted back into open water. Sam remained quiet. Kowalski's eyes stayed fixed on the horizon. Inside him, a weight had lifted, but a deep sadness remained. Still, now he had a story to bring to Lisa, and he made a vow. Whatever lies at the heart of the ocean, whatever secrets it holds, I'll uncover them. For Tom, for Jake, for Lisa, and for my own soul. The sea carried them forward. The sky glowed brighter. The waves softened. But deep down in the dark, unknowable ocean, Kowalski could still feel something moving. The silence of the island, the symbols in the cave, the words in Jake's journal, all pointed to a larger story still waiting to be told. Now he understood. Tom's story had ended here, but his own was just beginning. As the boat made its way back, there was only one thought in Kowalski's mind: the heart of the ocean. The words carved beneath the star symbol he'd seen on the island, the calling hinted at in Jake's final journal, and the message on the stone table. It ends here. Everything pointed somewhere. When he reached Crescent Harbor, he called Lisa. In a low, broken voice, he said only, "I found them." There was a long silence on the other end, then Lisa's whisper, "Where?" "I need to explain, in person." That evening, Lisa came to Kowalski's small office. Her hands were clasped before her, her face worn by years but still carrying a faint glimmer of hope. Kowalski placed Jake's journal, Tom's letter, and Stone's notes on the desk. "All the pieces are here, and I owe them to you," he said. Lisa didn't dare touch the journal. What happened to them? Why couldn't Jake come home? Kowalski was quiet for a while, his gaze on the floor. Before Tom died on the island, he found something. Maybe by accident, or maybe he already knew. Deep inside a cave was a chamber carved into stone, filled with markings. And Jake, after his father's death, he encountered something there. Lisa's hands trembled. "What do you mean, something?" According to Jake's journal, he started hearing voices in the cave. At first in his dreams, then while awake, the voices called to him. The journal reads, "They're calling me to the heart of the ocean. I have to go." Kowalski showed her the final page. "I couldn't make it home, but find me. Don't forget me." Lisa's eyes filled with tears. "And did you find him?" "I found Jake in the cave, but only his bones remained. Next to him was a carved sign, a star and the words, 'Heart of the Ocean.'" Lisa lowered her head. "What does it mean? What is the heart of the ocean?" Kowalski slowly opened the cabinet behind him and took out the letter Stone had left. "I think the answer is here." In Stone's letter it read, "If you're reading this, you've come very close to the secret. What you found on the island is only the beginning. What we call the heart of the ocean is not a place, but a choice. The thin line, where a human soul decides whether to remain in the dark or step into the light. Tom saw it. Jake touched it. And now, you must decide. For centuries, sailors have said the lost never return, because some hear the ocean's call and choose never to come back. That star is their mark. To vanish or to stay, you must choose. Their story ends here, but yours is still being written. When Lisa finished the letter, she was quietly sobbing. So, he chose to go. Kowalski held her gaze, gently nodding. That island became both their grave and their home. On the last stone Jake carved, it said, "I'm going to the heart of the ocean. I couldn't come home, because home is here now." Lisa covered her face with her hands. "And now I stay here for him?" Kowalski handed her the journal, the letter, and Tom's final words. They lived, Lisa. They fought, and they held on to each other. On Jake's last page, he wrote one more thing, his final words to you. "Mum, I loved you. Have hope. You found us." A few days later, with Kowalski's help, Lisa contacted the Coast Guard. Tom's remains and Jake's skeleton were officially laid to rest. The ceremony was small but heartfelt. The townsfolk came one by one to offer condolences. At the foot of the two graves, the stones read, "Thomas Peaton, husband, carpenter sailor, 1970 to 2012. Jacob Peaton, sailed to the heart of the ocean, 1994 to 2014. After the ceremony, Lisa walked over to Kowalski. "What happens now?" she asked softly. Kowalski looked toward the horizon. "Now, we show the sign they left behind to others. Maybe that's our job, to light the way for those who might return." Lisa let her fingers trace over the gravestones, then smiled faintly. "They're still here for me, and they always will be," Kowalski said. Months passed. The island's official name was changed to Peaton Island. It was added to the charts with a beacon and a plaque. On the plaque, it read, "Here rest two souls who touched the heart of the ocean, a memory for those who hope despite fear." Lisa visited the island from time to time. She would leave a small flower and sit by the stone table, sometimes with Jake's journal in her hands, sometimes with Tom's letter. On one of those days, she stood at the cave entrance, looked at the star symbol, and whispered, "I won't forget you. And you did come home in my heart." Kowalski too would return each anniversary. He'd stand quietly by the graves, then look out at the horizon and remove his hat. Each time, he would silently repeat to himself, "The heart of the ocean is our choice." Years later, Peaton Island became a memorial for the lost. Every sailor who came left a note on the stone table, stood beneath the star in the cave, and silently made a wish. On the island's stones, one sentence remained carved. "It ends here, but the real story begins now." Perhaps stories never truly ended. They were simply continued, by new hands, by new hearts. The ocean was always full of secrets, but at least now, someone knew. Being lost didn't always mean being gone. Sometimes it was just choosing a different way home. When Lisa finally bid farewell to the island and boarded the boat one last time, she thought to herself, "I found you, and I found myself too." The boat slowly drifted away from the island as the horizon turned gold, and beneath that golden light, at the heart of the ocean, two souls whispered to each other, "Tell Mum, we came home."